Hello, welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. So, for those conversations, you can join us live every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern. And we love seeing you live on Facebook or on YouTube. We are where most people are. And always love chatting with you live. So if you want to join that live, great. If not, we also like having you listen to us later because we're there wherever you are. You know me. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up, we have Joe Martinez. Hello and good evening.
Hello and good evening. Joe Martinez. I am Mr. Decorum and Etiquette. That's what I'm known for.
So choked on my beer. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're totally going to talk about that tonight because that's my thing. That's all I know. I live for it.
You embody it.
I'm Joe. You know me. I'm a member of stuff and things, and I do things. So good to see y'all.
Speaking of embodying good decorum, check out the body of Jason Richards.
Let's not. We'll keep it from, chest up. Jason Richards here, past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C., also member of Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio, and you will not be checking out my body tonight.
Face for radio, body for YouTube. Maybe it's Maybelline. Robert Johnson, how are you?
What is happening?
I'm just laughing at y'all. You're so funny. Robert Johnson, past master, Waukegan 78 in Waukegan, Illinois. Current sitting secretary at the Space Novum Lodge 1183, the premier education lodge in the state of Illinois. Thanks.
No, thank you. Awesome. Great, we've got a full house tonight. Before we get started, as always, we'd like to give a special shout out to the patrons who've been supporting the show. You guys are awesome.
Woo!
Head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable and hop in to some behind-the-scene goodies on our private Facebook group, to include some links from tonight's show. So if you want to get direct access to some of the little cool research we found, hop on over there. So we'll see you there.
And if you want to learn Joe's extra rules of decorum, go there too. Patreons, you get all my extra tidbits of wisdom when it comes to just being a proper Mason. You get all the things.
Void where prohibited. The Masonic Roundtable will not be held liable for anyone who is expelled based on Joe's rules of decorum.
What's this? I show up to Lodge, and Joe said that if I would do this, it'll all be good.
Yes.
I just really wanted you to work something in there like Joe Martinez, purveyor of fine green lanterns.
Ooh.
Look at all those things.
Look at those things, right?
I know. A lot. There's a lot going on there. Where are we? Oh.
Hey,
are you a big fan?
Other side? There.
Never mind.
I
heard you like comic books.
We've got a show
I do
to
like
do,
comic books.
guys.
Righto.
Show.
We do?
Yeah.
Show some decorum. Decorum!
Show some decorum.
Jeez Louise.
All right, so
But decorum is inherently personal.
It's inherent in the system. All right, so here's what we need to do. We need to go through some.
Come see the violence inherent in the system.
So while we're choosing this topic, started getting a couple PDFs being floated around from our Grand Lodge about, some tips and tricks on protocol and decorum and Masonic etiquette. And reading through it, pretty nice little book. We'll go through some of the aspects of that. Plenty more to cover in one show. However, as we're doing our research, we wanted to look around to what are some other rules or guidance that comes from other jurisdictions on basically what's common and maybe what are some of the differences between Masonic protocol, etiquette, and decorum. I'm a person who kind of believes words mean things, and so I like to start things off by saying, like, okay, let's drill down to what are the definitions of the words we're trying to talk about, because guess what? Grand Lodges will treat them a little bit differently depending on their interpretation of that. So looking at all of the different jurisdictional guidelines, guidebooks on etiquette, Masonic etiquette, for example, they do define it differently. I'm going to pick Virginia's not just because it's pretty much my home jurisdiction, but I think they do a really good job of separating the definitions. So specifically, in the Virginia guide on etiquette, Masonic etiquette, I like one section. They drill it way down. They talk about the difference between etiquette and decorum specifically. So I'm going to quote them here. In Virginia, they say, when we speak of etiquette, we're talking about established rules of manners and behavior at certain times and places. So etiquette is established rules of manners and behavior at certain times and places. When we talk about Masonic etiquette, we're talking about rules established by the craft that we must learn and follow. So that's etiquette. In contrast, the principle of decorum stands at the opposite pole, for it includes good manners and irreproachable behavior required by a man's own sense of dignity and good taste. Thus, within the bounds of good manners, each man must follow fashion of his own sense of decorum.
So it's subjective. Is that what you're saying?
Ooh, decorum, according to this definition, could be subjective, where etiquette are kind of the established rules and behaviors. Well, first thing comes to mind. Go ahead, Robert.
No, I was just going to say first of all, when were the words that your Grand Lodge has adopted written?
So this was fairly recent. So let me get an actual date.
So if it's recent enough then we can actually count on the definition that they're giving us.
2008,
which is important.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really important. We have a lot of antiquated terms. For instance, in Illinois, our Grand Lodge's constitutions actually never mention the word etiquette, not once. It does have the word behavior. And when we pull those, there's like cut and paste things from really old documents that are still contained within there. And we'll talk about it later, but those things matter. So, I mean, if your Grand Lodge has something and they're using old verbiage, then it may be a completely different meaning, right? So, but for you, this is not applicable.
Yeah, in this case,
I digress.
Well,
no, but it's good.
Well, it kind of is, though. I mean, it's. I mean, what John was reading was a publication that came out from the Grand Lodge. But if you look at our quote unquote constitutions, I mean, they cut and paste all the important bits out of Anderson's, just like most of the other Grand Lodges do, like concerning God and religion and concerning behavior and that kind of thing. It's all pretty similar from what you see from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. This was just a cutout pamphlet saying, hey, here's some decorum and protocol and etiquette because you guys don't have any.
So I'm glad you mentioned protocol too, because that is a word that, while is in our etiquette guide, they really don't define it, and it's really only used once, right? So that kind of irks me, because
that's protocol.
That's protocol, right? So going to Google, the Google definition is the accepted or established code of procedure or behavior in any group, organization, or situation. The accepted or established code of procedure or behavior in any group, organization, or situation. So that
write that down.
That would align with the etiquette. So that would be synonymous with etiquette as far as group behaviors. So one thing I tend to think through, now I'm going to step back and kind of go back to my vocation of like organizational dynamics, right? One of the best definitions of the word culture, because we've talked about lodge culture and other types of organizational culture before. The best definition I prefer of what culture means is the set of established behaviors of a group or organization. So basically, what does that mean? Okay, John, dumb it down for me. That means if I see lots of people acting a certain way, but whether it's explicitly written down or they just kind of always have done it that way, that is a culture that happens. So if you want to change culture, you're actually trying to change behaviors of the group. In this case, when we're talking about Masonic etiquette, we're talking about established behaviors we want to see, or some of them written down, many of them written down similarly across jurisdictions.
The landmarks.
Well, not quite landmarks, but
Unless your
Almost.
jurisdiction is mouth to ear, then they're not written down.
Then
You
they're
just
not.
have to know them.
unless they're
Everybody
not,
knows the landmarks,
unless they're
and
not
they
a
never
secret of
change.
masonry. Yes, until they do. So I don't know. To me,
Oh.
that those differences make a difference because, again, especially when you talk about decorum, the last thing I'll say about protocol, and then we'll get into some of the fun stuff, is to me as an engineer, when I hear the word protocol, I think of communication mechanisms, right? So the protocol of when you arrive to a friend's house, you either ring the doorbell or you knock on the door. That is protocol, right? You just don't walk in, right? There's an established rule of communication. So
Just walk in.
just walk.
I
Just
walk
kick,
in. Yeah,
kick
I
the
just
door
walk in.
down.
Don't even knock.
I don't knock.
Surprise.
Stab the Tyler with his own sword
Right.
on the way in.
And so
Because they're subjective.
it's very subjective. But when I hear Masonic protocol, I start to think of those cross-jurisdictional diplomatic relations of how you're supposed to communicate from Grand Secretary to Grand Secretary, for example. That's what I hear when I see the word protocol in a Masonic context, but I really haven't seen it written down explicitly that way, which makes it confusing. Yes, Joe.
Question, Mr. Ruark. Yeah, Joe Martinez, love your
What's with all
class.
this decorum?
So that's protocol. You mentioned a particular Joe Martinez. Yes. You mentioned what does it say? I got my own picture there. You brought up an interesting example, and I have trouble in my brain figuring out which one it is. So you're not allowed to talk to another grand jurisdiction until you go through the grand
Right.
secretary. Now, is that protocol or etiquette, or is that the rules?
Yeah, so
You
I
know?
was told verbally that is
You were told
Masonic.
off.
I was told off verbally that was Masonic protocol. However, there's no documentation
In
of
the
that.
law book?
It might be written in the Masonic Code, which is the law, but part of the law could be how you talk to other jurisdictions, for example. Now we're getting all confusing here.
It's subjective.
It's subjective. It's all subjective. And if for no other reason, every Grand Lodge is going to have their own different levels of Masonic etiquette. So that's a little bit of way too much more information than you cared about to get into. But I think it's important to establish the layers of expected behaviors. So when we talk about that, we're going to see examples tonight of expected behaviors when you are in lodge, when you are walking around lodge, for example, when you are at a public lodge event, when you are outside of lodge, or when you are in the profane world, you're out in the real world. And so that could be sets of behaviors that may or may not change depending on where you are. So let's talk about some. Let's where do you want to start? Outside in or inside out? Robert, your call.
Let's go inside out, because I think for the most of us, we're looking at the decorum in the lodge almost easing as the farther you get from the lodge. But the more you dive into some of the verbiage, maybe that's not the case. But you would think it is.
Right,
Hey, I'm out of
that's-
lodge. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Right.
Can you, though?
Yeah, that might be interesting. You just put an interesting thought in my head. Given the previous definitions, it's more etiquette when you're closer to a tiled lodge, and it shifts towards decorum when you're outside the lodge. But we'll go into that. Think about that. Hold that thought.
And it's protocol when it involves the Grand Lodge.
Even outside of lodge.
Yes.
Especially when you're sending emails to grand secretaries.
Yeah.
Based on true story. So, Joe, what are some...
If you're not a Mason, it doesn't matter. You can email whatever Grand Secretary you want.
all day,
If
every
you're a
day.
Mason, it matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll never live that
So I
down.
got
All
one.
right, Joe, give us some examples of when you're in a tiled lodge, meaning lodge is open formally and you have to be a Mason to be operating inside of the lodge. What are some examples? Again, these are going to be mostly the same across jurisdictions. What are
Okay.
some things that a Mason should do or be aware of in a
The
tiled
big
lodge?
one, and I think it's the very first one you learn after becoming a Mason, because 19 people scream at you the first time you do it, is walking
Want to become a Shriner?
between
No,
yes,
the other thing.
Oh, the
walking
other thing
between,
people scream at you.
my God, calm down. Walking between the altar and the master. Every new Mason has done this once in their life, never to do it again. And I'm right, because 19 people stop and point fingers at you and yell and holler and scream. But yeah, so discuss. Is that decorum? Is that etiquette? Or is that protocol? Which one
That
is
is
it?
an established set of behaviors that the whole group has. That would be Masonic etiquette
Etiquette.
within the tiled lodge. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Not left to an individual brother's discretion. Because if you decide you just want to stroll across that, go see what happens.
So here's the question though: is that actually codified anywhere, or is that another
Not that I've seen
mouth
it.
to ear-ism? Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
Not
never
in
actually seen it written down.
not
Me
in my
neither.
jurisdiction.
I will say there are jurisdictions that do have that explicitly called out as a big no-no written down. Yep. All right.
Is
What
that
was
another category? No-nos? So we're gonna
no-nos?
have etiquette, decorum,
Masonic
protocol,
no-nos.
and no-nos.
And
Okay.
yeses. Yes.
Okay. Right on.
All right, Jason, give me another example of good Masonic etiquette within the tiled lodge.
Good Masonic etiquette within the tiled lodge is you do not address the master of the lodge until he gives you permission to speak, or at least recognizes you.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'll add to that and say that I've read in a couple of these jurisdictional guides, just having side conversations when the lodge is open and under the. Yes. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be awesome if we stuck to that? Just that alone.
You know what's cooler? When you tell people before you start a meeting, saying, "Hey, shut up. Don't have side conversations." 5 seconds later, they start. You start hearing about baseball scores and the gas price that day. Yeah, so I would put that one under all three: etiquette, protocol, decorum,
And
and
should
no
be
no's.
decorum.
Just
And no
don't do it.
no's. Right.
And no no's.
There's another one that I quite enjoy as well that takes place during degree work, where there is codified etiquette that if someone messes up or misses some lines, like you don't yell at them and make a big fuss or scene.
Which is interesting because that should be obvious decorum, right? That to basically keep your passions down. And yet I have seen in a couple of these other jurisdictional guides, they do explicitly say that on prompting during ritual, that there should be. Of course, a lot of these are loose. They're not legal writing, so they don't include the word shall, but should or would or could include like an official prompter, for example. So that way you don't have five
Yeah.
versions of the ritual being yelled at you from the sidelines, right? There should be.
It's like the
an individual.
master or his designated prompter, right?
Right, which should be good behavior within the lodge. Robert, any other ones come to mind off the top of your head about inside of the lodge?
Yeah, so there's definitely some that you have already mentioned that are codified within Illinois anyway, right? Number one, the first thing mentioned is in the lodge while constituted, you are not to hold private committees or separate conversation without leave from the master. Nor nor to talk of anything impertinent or unseemly, nor interrupt the masters or wardens, yada yada yada. One of my favorite though is where it says, nor behave yourself ludicrously or jestingly while the lodge is engaged in what is serious and solemn. Now I know we all know what that means, right? This ritual work, In fact, in the Illinois Code, we are required by bylaw, and this is in a lot of jurisdictions, that before a certain part of a certain degree, we have to read a certain code, which basically states if you decide that you want to act up or act jestingly during this thing, you're going to get your butt kicked out, and there will be disciplinary action.
Mhm.
I find that fascinating.
But to pay due reverence to your master wardens and fellows and put them to worship or to put them to honor, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I find that one about keeping a serious tone during at least one part of the ritual. I find it to be fascinating because it seems like every jurisdiction had a problem with it in the past, and they've all tried to
Yes.
rectify it with law.
Well, what do you expect, right?
The law is like, guys, this is really important.
No, really.
Don't cheapen it. Yeah.
Do you guys? So for the Masons listening, I'll be as vague as I can with you guys. You guys will get it, I hope. You know the cartoon sound, like when Scooby-Doo decides to like run away, that thing, right? I have been to lodges that use that sound effect when somebody's trying to flee to another port. And I'm like, what is this?
I just threw up spiritually right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is bad.
I'm offended.
You should be. This is baloney. Like I almost whatever, right?
That's like using opening lodge with hi ho, it's off to work I go from the musician.
Or certain selections from the artist known as Ludacris. Those can't be used in Illinois either.
It says you can't use Ludacris.
Whatever word you say, Ludacris or DMX or any of those.
I think you could use those, but only if Nate sings them.
He does. Yep. The explicit version. Yeah, that's how we roll here. Casa Martinez.
And of course, one we've talked about in the past on the Masonic Roundtable is electronics usage, right? That's been a more recent piece of etiquette that needs to be documented, right?
But I'm putting stuff on my calendar.
You were putting stuff on your calendar when we gavelled down for the first time.
Look, man.
Your calendar looks like Crossy Road from here.
There's nothing that's been
Wordle.
codified in Illinois that says you can't be on your phone. Everybody kind of knows, like, you should have it on for the right reasons. Can I read you this? Maybe you guys can help me discern this, because this seems like a really weird statement that Illinois makes. It says, if any complaint be brought, the brother found guilty shall stand to the award and determination of the lodge, who are the proper and competent judges of all such controversies, unless you carry it by appeal to the Grand Lodge, and to whom they ought to be referred, unless a lord's work, in capital Lord, right, be hindered, the mean, while in which case a particular reference may be made. But you must never go to law about what concerneth masonry without an absolute necessity apparent to the lodge.
I'll take a stab at the beginning part where it's talking about keep your lodge stuff local. You know what I mean? If you have an issue in the lodge, fix it within the lodge.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
If you don't like that answer, then you can take those appeals up to your district deputy or to the Grand Lodge or what have you.
So protocols.
Ooh,
are these protocols?
I mean, they sound like more serious
like guidelines.
K-Jack Sparrow.
No. That was his first mate. Was Barbarossa.
No, I think that's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it's appealing to the process, which to me sounds more protocol of when to how to put out fires, right, without it escalating not only to the appeal to the Grand Lodge, but even it says never go to the law about what concerneth masonry. So this is where we've probably all heard of or thought of examples that we've heard of in the past of where something got so bad it actually got some quarrel within Masonry got so bad it actually went to court, right? It went outside of Masonry, outside of Masonic trial to an actual legal trial.
Oh, I've heard of brothers
Yeah.
suing other brothers for, and this is all within the walls of Masonry, for libel, for slander, for for being butthurt, just civil suits galore. So I think that kind of speaks to that, like, hash it out locally, go in the parking lot, duke it out as brothers. But yeah, don't sue each other and issue restraining orders against each other because you have to go to lodge together. So
That's interesting. Yeah, because that almost sounds like something that should be in the law section of your Grand Lodge rather than the etiquette side.
Well, so I wonder if that's a liability thing though, like, you know, making something legal code that you can't or shouldn't, seek like legal lawful due process in the court. That to me, I like I don't know. I feel like there could be some liability there with the Grand Lodge,
well,
or
I mean,
some risk
could
on
it,
the
could
Grand
it
Lodge they would have to
but
accept.
not to belabor this point, but could it be, because you always have the get out of jail free card of it's voluntary membership. You don't have to be there. You're not required to be a member. You do that by choice. So with that choice comes certain um uh, consents to that sense of personal liberty. Like, I'm a member of this group and I'm going to conform to those standards and rules and what have you. So you kind of give that up a tiny bit when you choose to be there, as opposed to not having a choice, like a slave or something. Anyway, let's pick another one.
Yeah. So here's one that's a little bit more looser, which is about how to address brethren, especially by their titles. Some jurisdictions explicitly call it out that when you're aware of their title, then you should always address them within a tiled portion by their highest level of rank or rank they prefer. What are your thoughts on that?
So Massachusetts, for those homies right here that are members of Ezekiel Bates, they have a card that you can download on your lodge website, on your membership page. It's a card that tells you when you need to call someone by their title and when you don't need to call them by their title. And there's different examples and instances, like when I'm in lodge, when I'm in the dining hall, when I'm at a lodge function, and it tells you exactly what title you're supposed to use for that person at that particular time. So some of them are spelled out, some are not.
I got to be honest, like more than half the time, I don't remember anybody's titles. I can barely keep their names straight. I'm just that guy.
Hey, brother.
Yes. Always default to brother.
Can't go
And
wrong.
some people get offended by it. If so, too bad. Like it's not my intention to demean your rank and title. It's that's the best I got right now.
If you get offended by it, I'm pretty sure you're in Masonry for the wrong reasons.
You said it. I was thinking it.
Boom.
Yep. So I actually opened up the Massachusetts one. There's a whole page that says the incorrect use of titles. Yes.
Good thing we wrote that down.
Yes. So you will call someone, and they're using Bill Jones. I guess he's the popular person. You will call someone Brother Jones or Brother William Jones. You will never refer to him as Brother Bill. That's a no-no. Don't make that. I'm reading what's on here.
What?
Or you will have Worshipful Brother Jones or Worshipful William Jones. You will never call him Worshipful Bill Jones. Again, that's a boo-boo.
What if Bill hates the name William?
That's not up to him because it's associated with his Masonic title. So, and they do have, I do love this. They have a phonetic spelling of the word brethren. It is brethren, not brethren or brotherin.
Brothern?
I'm putting this
Brothern.
on Facebook. Brothern. So that might be good for the folks in New England, but it doesn't serve brethren south of the Mason-Dixon line, because they talk different.
Now, another one that I found interesting about, when lodges open, that they actually prefer, they actually have an attendance section as well. So basically, it says something along the lines of when lodge is open, that really should be trying to attend lodge as often as possible. He should endeavor to attend all stated or emergent meetings, and he should always appear on time, properly clothed, subjecting himself to all its bylaws and general regulations.
Don't tell that to any of my lodge masters.
Yes.
Question, Mr. Ruark, protocol.
Brother
When did we
Jonathan
get-
Ruark. Worshipful Brother Jonathan Ruark.
Worshipful brother Jonathan T. Ruark of the Cincinnati
Esquire.
Ruarks. Esquire. PhD. Sir, when did we get out of the habit? I remember I've seen people post these on social media and stuff, but like these old lodge summonses where it's like, you are summoned to come to lodge, and if you don't, you have to pay a nickel or $1 or something like that. Like you actually got fined for not coming to lodge. So when did we stop doing that? And now maybe
When our membership numbers tanked.
Oh,
Well, like Waukegan Lodge actually has that in their first set of bylaws. It was like something 16 cents per meeting that you missed. And the secretary would annually collect just before dues were to be collected. But I noticed that this was stricken somewhere in the 30s and 40s. And my guess is that's just when everybody started coming into masonry, so they didn't really give a hoot if you paid or not. And let's be honest, like if you tried that today, some dudes would laugh.
Yeah, try me.
They-
yeah. That being said, again, I do know the culture of, again, Prince Hall lodges in this general area is very much more strict on attendance, right? They do require, like you got to have a doctor's note, right? If you can't make, the stated meetings, especially, holy smokes, if you're an officer of that lodge, right? And yeah, there's reasons
Kudos.
for that. Okay, so those are good. I'm sure we'll think of some more and come back to those. Now, lodge closes, but you haven't gone home yet. Now, what is proper etiquette / decorum in that case? Anyone? Bueller.
Mr. Ruark, protocol.
Bueller. Sorry, you have to address me by my proper title.
Worshipful brother Jonathan Ruark, T. Ruark, Esquire.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
My favorite one has to be, as soon as you run out of the lodge room, you start talking about religion and politics. And you run to the dining room, grab a cup of Joe, and just start talking about religion and politics.
Do you fit in the cup?
No.
The cup of Joe.
Okay.
A cup of me.
It sounds painful. 2 Joes, 1 cup.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny how the politics and religion line ends right there at that threshold, right at the door, and all of a sudden we could start talking about the religious and political aspects of the day.
Yeah.
Something that Illinois has says behavior after the lodge is over and the brethren not gone. So now the lodge is over, but we're all still hanging out. And the first 2 sentences of this are really interesting to me because they speak to perhaps something that used to be able to happen, but obviously doesn't anymore. It says, you may enjoy yourself with innocent mirth, treating one another according to ability, but avoiding all excess. Oh, excess of what? Of forcing any brother to eat or drink beyond his inclination or hindering him from going when his occasions call him, or doing or saying anything offensive. So basically, like, don't be a peer pressure guy, but like
Offensive.
it kind of
That's an
sounds like they're
interesting
able to
term.
have some beers or something. That's wild.
But I think the interesting word there, the operative word, is offensive too, because that's way beyond religion and politics, right? That could be dirty jokes. That could be, just there's a very broad spectrum of societal and cultural norms of what could be offensive.
Oh, you should be you should be at some of the lodges I've been to when somebody who's not like super familiar has an
Right.
off-color joke.
Oof.
It's like crickets, and that person gets taken aside, and they're like, "I'm not sure this is the right meeting for you," and then it's really bizarre.
Good.
But I like that because, yeah.
So yeah, intemperance and excess, we want to make sure we keep that to a minimum, because
I
even
would
though
bump that up to a protocol. I mean, it's not just etiquette. You know what I mean? It should be the law of the land, right? And I know that in my jurisdiction this year, our district deputy gave this awesome talk. Right? He didn't do your usual Grand Lodge spiel when he came for his official visit. He came for a talk. Basically, the point of the talk was everywhere you go in the world is your lodge, right? It's not just the room with the altar in it. It's not just the parking lot. It's every single place you go is the lodge. So act like you're in lodge every single place you go. Go to Target, you go to Golden Corral,
so if I'm
you go
in
to
church,
Sizzler.
don't cut between the altar and the priest.
Right.
Okay.
If you
And
go to that kind of
and
church,
make sure
yeah.
you stand up and you wait to be addressed at work
Right.
before
Yes.
you talk.
That's not what
Okay,
I meant.
got-
Before.
That's
Yes.
literally what was said. To act as if you were in lodge.
Right. I think
Everyone.
we were talking about the
Literally.
the off colorness and
So-
the
Joe, what about this?
what?
It says, therefore, no private piques or quarrels must be brought within the door of the lodge, right? Okay, big deal. Far less any quarrels about religion or nations or state policy. We being only as Masons of the Catholic religion, above mentioned. We are also of all nations, tongues, kindred, and languages, and are resolved against all politics, as what never yet conduced to the welfare of a lodge, nor ever will. So what's interesting there, right, is there, aside from the fact that they said they're all Catholics,
Is
They
it
didn't.
uppercase
Is
or
it-
lowercase Catholic?
Lowercase c.
Got to be a
lower.
lowercase
Yeah.
c.
Universal.
Lowercase c, which means universal
Mhm.
Right.
church.
Good catch, Jason.
Okay, cool.
'Cause- Yeah.
So basically, what's interesting though to me is it says
Confirmations
never-
coming back, baby.
it's good.
I paid attention when I was 13.
One time.
As what never
One time.
yet conduced to the welfare of the lodge, nor ever will. So basically, don't talk about this stuff because they've never helped us and they never will. That seems what they're saying. But I'm fairly certain that those policies have helped us, especially with property taxes. But
You
I
know,
digress.
and I'm going to go off on a tangent here because I love the way this is
Shocker.
written. About religion or nations or state policy. So religion, obvious. State policy, politics. But nations, this is one place that I've rarely seen of the third aspect of what you're not supposed to talk about in lodge, right? Religion, politics, and nations or states
Borders.
or borders. And
Yep.
that's something that I find, I wish that we brought that back more explicitly, and that it is written down here in the Illinois Code of, you know, my town is better than your town. My football team can beat up your football team, right? So I think that is another thing that divides men and something that we should be working into our etiquette as well.
I like it.
Fair enough. Now, to Joe's point that he so poorly communicated. What about
Wow.
when you're outside the lodge completely and you are out in public society? How should Masons act? Jason, what do you think?
So, recognizing that the duties that you have bound yourself to in Freemasonry do not diminish and or disappear the moment you step out of the lodge building. I think every brother has a duty, regardless of whether he, wears a Masonic ring or puts a Masonic emblem on his car. Every brother has a duty to, show kindness to everyone and try to continue to inculcate the lessons of Freemasonry, even around those who are not in the know.
I'm seeing a head nod. Joe, you agree with that?
My God, yeah. I mean, that's the whole
Okay, good.
point, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, yeah, for a change, there's nothing Jason said that I would argue with.
Even a stopped clock is right twice a day, unless it's digital.
Yes.
Unless it's digital.
12,
Yeah.
12, 12. Robert, I see you contemplating that aspect as well. What are your thoughts?
I just agree. I think it's
Concur.
as we're going through this, what becomes apparent, the thing that I was kind of lost in thought there is this idea that you're being held to a standard within the lodge, right? And then depending on how you amalgamate or not amalgamate, depending on how you bring those traits with you when you leave the lodge, you necessarily start using and doing those same things in your day-to-day life. And maybe that's an element of making good men better. Maybe that's just like learning your manners. I don't know, but it certainly feels like today, manners, decorum, and things are a thing that are much. Maybe I'm a prude, right? Um, I still, walking my kids into school, I make them take their hat off if they walk under the flag. Just stuff like that. But that's just me. Or take your hat off in an elevator when take your hat off when the ladies in the elevator, whatever. My
Right,
things
right,
my
right.
dad told me. Maybe I'm just antiquated, right? But all these like decorums and rules and things,
Right.
these ideas of politeness, and generally fall under this kind of thing where it's like make other people comfortable, be polite, be welcoming, um, be the person who welcomes somebody into the community, right? And I just feel like we're doing a lot of that in masonry, or like we're called to do that. And
Called to
these
do
these
that.
yeah, we don't always do it.
Well, and it's
I mean,
it's counterculture, right? It's not the norm anymore. Like I spent all week this week getting into elevators that go up very tall buildings. And just that thing that Robert said, it kind of struck me. It's like, wow, you walk into an elevator and what do you normally see? You're not welcomed by someone, right? People will put their heads down and gravitate towards the corners or away from you or something, and make space for you. And it's the exact opposite of what you were talking about. And I think we've just been culturally ingrained to be isolated towards one another. But to your point, I think
Yeah, don't say hi to anybody you're getting into the elevator with.
no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When we were, I don't. Whenever we're together with any of you, I've been in elevators with all of you guys, and we're always joking with the people who are in there, or talking to the couple who are
Right.
going down to the pool, or whatever the case is. And I think maybe that's just, I don't know. We're all to some extent. Some of us are introverts, but I think these qualities push us into a realm of like community and I don't know, just
Yeah, so
friendliness.
I think what I'm hearing is like two levels of expectations of Masons in the public, right? There's the like don't be a jerk, right? Will Wheaton's rule, like you can't. We should at a minimum have that threshold of do no harm, and then the second one should be do good, right? We should actually be going out of the way and be representatives of the morals and virtues that were inculcated in the lodge. And
Well,
so, Joe?
to just to take that thread and pull on it a little bit more to Robert's point, I think you're right. I think some of us do naturally incline towards being introverted or private, but I think that Freemasonry helps us extol some of those virtues in a way that we wouldn't normally think, like being the polite person in the elevator or when you walk in a door, and you know uh, allowing others to feel a level of comfortability, because that's what it's all about, right? We're one whole human species. um and people either have to start living like that, or we're just going to be more isolated and alone, and we're seeing the ramifications of that. And I know I'm getting on a soapbox, but it's so true, you know.
But so the opposite's true, right? Because if you happen to be wearing a Masonic ring and you are a jerk, right? You're representing, a million Masons in the United States, right? So,
Less than that. It's
well,
less.
yeah, I'm adding the bonus
So
track. So,
what's funny about that,
I
John,
thought it
is
was 3.
What's funny about this, what you bring up, this idea of people seeing the emblems, the only place I've actually ever seen anything codified, and it's not even in our section on behavior. Illinois has a code that basically says if the four of us go to lodge and we leave and we go out and go anywhere where there's going to be drinks served, we are not to have any Masonic emblems on. Rings, badges, shirts, hats, nothing. Because
Wow.
like it's
Pocket
just really
square?
interesting. Yeah, and I'm freaking out. Like I'm like, no, should we just strike this? Because I go out to drinks with grand officers all the time with all this
You should call
stuff.
them on it. Excuse me, Right Worshipful.
I have-
Walk around
Yeah,
with the code book,
and
yes.
We're in
I hate that
violation
nobody
of the
does it.
Masonic Code.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna? We're
Solid.
gonna be like Mike Stoops and write ourselves up or file charges against ourselves. Epic move. Yeah, I mean, just wild. I mean, so we do this.
You said
Do you guys have anything that talks about behavior at home?
Well, on the section of pertaining to private behavior in the Grand Lodge of Virginia, because that's just the one I have pulled up right now. It says Masons ought to be moral men. They should be good sons, good husbands, good fathers, and good neighbors who avoid activities injurious to themselves, their families, neighbors, or the lodge. Moreover, they are to deal fairly and treat everyone with respect. So basically, it's saying you should be a good husband, right here in the guidebook.
Mine says you are to act as becomes a moral and wise man, particularly not to let your family, friends, and neighbors know the concerns of the lodge. What?
Guess what happened at
Mine-
Lodge tonight, hon?
Oh my God! My wife knows
Yeah.
all the drama.
that would never work because I come home, it looked like I turned purple from all the blood vessels bursting in my face. Did you have a great day? Yeah, I went to lodge. Yes. Anywho, I have another one that really chaps my chiclets.
Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah. What was that?
I've never heard chaps bite chiclets.
For those who don't
Chiclet's
know,
even still a thing.
I think they do.
Yeah,
they
they are.
do sell them.
Wow.
For those who are
Number
not
4 or 5
Patreons, my mouth is not always full of protocol and decorum, so I have to come up with other things to say. But I do have one that, again, really sasses me because it happens all the time, and it's in that etiquette guide, and it says, all prayers at lodge functions are non-sectarian. Freemasonry is worldwide and holds no sectarian views. Non-sectarian means not sectioned into one specific religion, because Freemasonry embraces all of religions. And then they even put a why in there. It says why, because prayers at lodge functions should be scrupulously in keeping with Masonic teachings, and the Masonic etiquette of offered prayers is that they should never be an expression of a specific sectarian view or dogmatic creed. Now, I have seen this rule of etiquette broken many, many times. And it's very off-putting, especially when you have brothers of other faiths in the same room.
Yeah, not accidentally. Clearly, brothers of other faiths.
It's not accidentally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They know.
It's awkward.
They just don't care.
It's
'Cause
really
like,
awkward.
Oh, the
Super
majority of
awkward.
us. It's
Super awkward.
Yeah. Lord.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have the whole supreme architect of the universe archetype, right? Like, okay, fine. If we really feel that way, then everyone gets to call the deity by whatever name they're familiar with. And then you're starting to get into the division of religion again. So by adding that, the
Nom de
deific
plume.
name, yes, the deific name really starts to. It's just been bad taste at best, but offensive at the worst.
I agree, and I'm a little sidetracked here, you guys. I'm reading the YouTube chat, and Brother Jose Venzer has such a great question. he says, like, basically around social media. Right? So this is outside the lodge and essentially non-tiled and in
Right.
strange company. He says, what do the knights think about when a brother posts stuff that is so full of disinformation you think it's actively promoting untruth and harm? Must we let it go? And Gary Meisner said, I would suggest we have to consider if our engagement would bring honor to the fraternity and if we are correcting in the most tender manner. So I agree with Brother Gary, like maybe a text message back, through Messenger or something, like, hey, you should check that out. I've done that several times, but it's not always taken.
What's the
well.
success rate on that? Because I know you do that. What's the success rate on the? I'm being sincere. What's the success rate on the private admonishment?
So it works sometimes. If it's more political, it doesn't work. If it's more about rights and equalities, it tends to work. I've done this with my non-Mason friends. My cousin, for example, my mom called my cousin on the phone to tell him he was being derogatory toward women, and she didn't appreciate it. And he said, "I'm sorry, Aunt Deb, I'll take it down." And he did. But the other thing is that without these constant interactions, without being like, it's like if you're around your mentor enough, it's drilled into you. You understand. But if you're not, and nobody's constantly calling you out, you have a tendency to revert to those same things. And I get it, right? Like, I'll say this: Carlos Hernandez, Carl Hearn. Carl posts some really edgy stuff sometimes that I think is meant to be funny. And sometimes for some people, it's over the edge, right? I just use Carlos, if you're listening, I'm not picking on you. I love your content and everything. I just think it is interesting, right? Like, he's dealt with this a lot. But it's a good thing to think about. How do you correct that behavior in the most friendly and tender manner, as Worshipful Brother Gary says?
Well, I think, and again, we can make this an entire episode just on this one statement that you made, but I think that a lot of these rules of etiquette and decorum and protocol, I think they take on a different spin when you talk about people's actions on social media, right? Because it is a whole level of interaction with the public that people never had before, right? When people would say the things that I know piss us off, in a room full of people, or in a small gathering or sitting around the dinner table, that was one thing. But when you have this platform, and don't get me wrong, I love social media, I pester all of you on it all the time, but when you have this forum where more than half of the people are just an echo chamber for your own opinions, right, where you get positive reinforcement and feedback from that opinion that you have, it's kind of hard to then have that private side chatter of, hey, you're being a little bit stinky poo poo, cut it out, because they're just getting all the, they're getting the thumbs up and they're getting the hearts and they're getting the cares, and I can't make any other emojis with my body, so that's all you get. But it's hard. And what?
I have tried on a couple different occasions to whisper that good counsel to people who are spreading misinformation on both sides of the political extreme. And 10 times out of 10, essentially, I have been told what I can go do with myself.
Oh, interesting.
And so...
read a book and enjoy it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Make like a tree and get the heck out of here. So for me, I recognize that, in some cases, preserving the peace and harmony of my own mental health means that I choose not to engage, and I, actively block or unfollow that content.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the final question tonight, and I'm going to prompt you, and then I'm going to go read a section out of one of the Pennsylvania's etiquette guidelines, and then have you respond, not from the Pennsylvania guideline, but from the prompt. So the prompt is, what additional Masonic etiquette, protocol, decorum, or whatever you want to call it, or no-nos, would you wish were more explicitly codified? Whether it be, and you can take your pick, whether it's something that's in a tiled meeting, that's something that's outside, something that it's at a public Masonic event, something that's out in public, whatever it is, your call. You can think about, what do you wish was either explicitly mentioned or at least firmly enforced. So think about that while I go to just a quote from Pennsylvania that I think will resonate with a lot of Freemasons. In the state, a Freemason is to behave as a peaceable and dutiful citizen, conforming cheerfully to the government under which he lives. He is to be a man of benevolence and charity, not sitting down contented while his fellows, much more his brethren, are in want when it is in his power, without prejudicing himself or his family, to relieve them. In the lodge, he is to behave with all due decorum, lest the beauty and harmony of its workings should be disturbed or broken. He is to be obedient to the master and other officers set in authority over him, and is to apply himself closely to the business of Freemasonry, that he may the sooner become skilled therein, both for his own credit and for that of the lodge, and thereby earn advancement as the wages of his labors. He is not to neglect his own necessary avocations for the sake of Freemasonry, nor to involve himself in quarrels with those who, through ignorance, may speak evilly or despitefully of it. He is to be a lover of the arts and sciences, and is to take all opportunities to improve himself therein. It's a pretty clear charge to the Freemasons, how they are to act both inside and outside the lodge setting. And boy, if we could just follow those, I think we'd be much better off. So with that, Robert, what Masonic etiquette, protocol, decorum, or no-nos would you start to encourage stronger?
No-nos.
I would like to see perhaps some codified language on actual Masonic offenses that deal with that specifically, like, let's just pretend there was a gross injustice done in IRL and that brother was allowed to stay a member. So in this, we have an alliance, collusion. The person who is enabling this is essentially complicit in the behavior. Like, if you know about something bad and you do nothing, you're just as guilty. And I think that there should be some verbiage that's codified, maybe not Masonic law, right? But something to be written or talked about within the decorum and etiquette section to say that if it's not spelled out already, right? Like, you should be a truthful and honorable man, that maybe they should speak to this a little bit. I think that would be good. I think we have a lot of things that we do codify, that we do. The Illinois Grand Lodge book has hundreds of codes, all of which all have a specific. They're pretty specific, which means they've happened. And I think that as we move forward, right, like, the book is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we have to make more ambiguous or vague language. The problem is that a society that continues to evolve and continues to change, we have offenses today in the law and in Masonry that were not fathomed at the time that these vague interpretations were written. Who said don't let the dead govern the living? Is that Jackson? Somebody like that? Anyway, I think that's what I'd like to see. Just that maybe.
Awesome. All right, how about you, Jason?
So I don't know. Typically, I want to go with less codification and regulation as opposed to more.
What a libertarian.
I was going to say,
Eh,
it
mostly.
depends on your governance structure.
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to see laid out a bit more specifically is the role of, or essentially, I have to think about this. What I'd like to see is more specific language governing criminal backgrounds and the impact of certain offenses on a man's ability to successfully petition for the degrees. Because I've seen it mostly go one way where someone, had an extenuating circumstance. They were, convicted of something 30 years ago, and somebody in the lodge got a burr up their backside and said, "Nope, nope, he's got a criminal conviction. We're not going to let him in." And I would like to see a protocol to put things a little bit more explicitly on, if it's this type of crime, if it's, this level of currency or periodicity,
It is very loose.
then here are the things you need to think about. Or here are some of the questions to ask. Like just some better guidelines to help lodges navigate the hard issue of, criminal history. I'd like to see that.
Nice. Thank you. Joe, what do you think about this Masonic etiquette?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to go in a little bit different of a tangent, and I think that we should codify more or make our intentions clear when it comes to the sanctity of the lodge room. That's my biggest. When I think of Masonic etiquette and Masonic decorum, I think of how we besmirch the lodge room when when the ritual starts and people are still goofing off and they're playing Wordle and or Candy Crush, whatever generation you happen to be a member of. I really wish you could codify it more to say, okay, once that door closes, you're in lodge. And before we get to all the boring administrivia that needs to happen because it's a business meeting, let's remember why we come. And let's make that a bit more sacred than we normally do. So if that could be codified, I think that would be wonderful because it would be impressed on the people that come to lodge saying, okay, I'm here for something more than a boring business meeting, and there is a sanctity to it, and I should respect it. And if that became part of the law, I think that would be helpful. And that's
I'd vote for that. Nice.
That's right.
All right. So here are my thoughts. So my brother-in-law had this crazy idea where he said, he's not a Mason, but he said that everybody who gets a car should also be given for free a dart gun with suction cup darts, right? That you could shoot at other cars. So if someone is an idiot driving down the road and you happen to pull up next to them, you could roll down your window, fire the suction cup dart at their car and have it stick to their car. Make it with a very strong adhesive that they can't take off very easily. And this would be kind of a literal red flag that it could be stuck to their car. And at any time, if you collect 3 or more darts for being an idiot driver, then the police should automatically have the authority to pull you over and give you some sort of citation for your behavior. Now, it never happened practically, but it's a great idea to think about, right? You can call it the idiot gun, right? If you just see an idiot, I should be able to just say, you know what? I'm gonna tag you publicly that this was you're really just pulling some jerk moves right now. Apply that to the same thing from Masons as well. It wouldn't be so much of something I would add. It would be more of the enforcement of these, because we see Masons behaving badly in public often, and so how do you deal with that without besmirching what we're taught repeatedly, we're inculcated in the morals and virtues that sometimes people don't take to heart and take that out into the world. And so if there was a way to enforce that, whether you have I'm not going to go all dystopian and say you have a social rating system or anything like that. I'm not going to go there, but just some way that we could say, you know what, this guy has broken Will Wheaton's law one too many times. We really need to have a sit down to talk about if Masonry is the best thing for him and if he is the best thing for Masonry. So that might be, when you talk about decorum, let's see what we can do to help people really try to focus on their own, work within their own passions and keep those circumscribed in a tighter spot. So that's my thoughts. So I wouldn't add anything, but I would enforce what we have a little bit stronger. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for watching and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.